evening and welcome to Monday Night Football live on Radio Saltire. I'm your host for this evening. My name is Craig Leach and tonight I'm joined by Sam Meechan and Mark Smith. Good evening, gents.
Good evening.
Good evening.
So tonight we've got a packed show covering contrasting fortunes for both Edinburgh clubs over the weekend, and later on in the show we'll also be joined live by former Hibs and Republic of Ireland goalkeeper Nick Colgan. So to start off, we'll go with the first game of the weekend, which was obviously Hibs' journey up to Aberdeen. 4-1. Flattering scoreline, Mark, or a well-deserved scoreline? Did we even deserve a goal?
I think it was fortunate that we got the goal, to be honest. In my opinion, Hibs looked the more lethargic of the two teams. Aberdeen were certainly up for it. 3 games in 6 days for Hibs. We went there, albeit throughout the match we had more possession. Aberdeen were clinical with their finishing. When we look at the defensive back four, they didn't turn up, in my opinion. And likewise, from a midfield perspective, the performance just wasn't there. There wasn't enough tracking back, and so I think overall the performance from Hibs was poor. But I want to remain relatively balanced. We were off the back of both old firm teams coming through to Easter Road, which arguably Hibs were tired. They looked tired.
No, I would agree with that. I mean, when you look at the personnel that was selected, during the week Lennon went quite bold and went for Stokes, Murray and Shaw against Rangers. Obviously reverted back to Simon Murray up front on his own. We arguably, probably with the exception of a fullback, what you would think is the strongest Hibs side. Looking at the team selection, like you say, you're picking up on the midfield. Obviously you had McGinn, McGeoch and Bartley in there up against the likes of Shinnie and McLean. Our midfield has had a lot of plaudits this season. Do you think that on Saturday they simply just came up against a better calibre of player, or like you say, was it really just maybe they were a wee bit too tired and just running a bit on empty?
No, it's a fair point. I think we've got to show Aberdeen some respect. They're not sitting second in the league for no reason. They've got quality and strength and depth across their midfield, and with their forward line as well. Aberdeen have been impressive all season. Arguably, they've been the most consistent team out with Celtic in the league. I think it was a combination of both the quality of the opposition, but at the same time, I don't want to be too downbeat. Hibs have been, playing teams off the park all season, not quite walking away with the results. But I think, on Saturday it was a case of tired legs, and it was 2 big games throughout the week. So as much as it was a disappointing result, I think there was a lot of individual mistakes and errors. Aberdeen just looked the fitter and more up for it. They were winning the majority of the midfield battles. They were first to every ball. Their anticipation was a lot better than Hibs on the day, and they got the break of the ball as well. When you look back at the goals, yes, you can niggle at players and say they could have done things better, but on the whole, there's some costly individual errors in there, but on the whole, we were punished by good quality opposition.
I would agree with that. I mean, you look at the the Aberdeen starting lineup there. They're in a position where they're quite lucky in that they can sort of swap players in and out. If Stevie May's not quite on it, they can bring in somebody like Adam Rooney. They've got quality players like Christie, McLean, Shinnie in there. They've even got the young players like Scott Wright, who's had a good season so far. And I would say that that's the difference, I think, between Aberdeen and Hibs at the moment. Aberdeen have got the depth there. Hibs don't quite have the depth. You've seen that against Rangers during the week when we were at the point where we were starting to chase the game, and because Lennon had went all out to start with, there was no real way that nobody could come on and make a positive impact and change the game. In terms of looking at the goals, I was having a conversation with one of the guys in my work today, and it was like Gary Mackay-Steven just seems to turn into Lionel Messi every time he plays Hibs. You look at he's someone who's had quite an up and down season. He's had some off-field issues. Obviously, he got the goal when they beat us at Easter Road, but that game on Saturday, he was involved in in all 4 goals. You know, I don't think you can apportion any blame for the first goal. You know, it's maybe a wee bit criticism of the midfield not tracking Shinnie's run.
Yeah.
But you know, it's a superb pass out to Mackay-Steven, who just it literally almost hits off his foot.
Yep.
And Shinnie has to run and get it. The second goal, I was a bit. I wasn't happy with.
Just cutting in on the first goal. I mean, I think when I was looking back on that in the TV highlights, you look at McGeoch tracking back, and I think for me over the past few weeks, McGeoch is just. I don't know if he's distracted because his contract's coming to an end. I don't know if he's feeling the pressure of trying to either get himself into the shop window, with other clubs, potentially coming in as suitors, as potential buyers for him, But he's not doing himself any favours at the minute, in my opinion. When I look at him against Celtic, he had a lot of sloppy errors. Against Rangers again, he had some individual errors, and against Aberdeen, you look at Shinnie's goal. You could see him just coming into the fold. So clearly Shinnie had started that run, 10-15 yards, possibly even more, to make that ball from Mackay-Steven and give him that auction. But where's McGeoch? He's a couple of yards off him. Just get goal side and track the run. So sorry for intervening there. It was just. I think that first goal was wholly preventable. Just needs a bit of tracking back and a bit of anticipation from our midfielders. And I don't want to blame our midfielders because McGeoch's a quality player. Just felt the past couple of games he's been a bit off the boil.
Yeah, and look at the second goal as well. Mackay-Steven gets he seems to pick up that little pocket on the edge of the box, and no one seems to close him down quick enough. Considine picks him out fairly easily. Yeah. And then, like I say, he turns into Messi, where he has the ball glued to his feet. He just nutmegs it. He just nutmegs McGregor. Yeah. Handling comes in to try and, but then looking at the goalkeeper's position, Marciano seems to be so devoid of any confidence at the moment. Arguably, in my opinion, he was at fault for both Rangers goals. Yes. On Wednesday, maybe a wee bit harsh on the first one, but certainly the second one. And then
I agree.
On Saturday there, he's hit the ground far too early. It's not even an unstoppable shot. What? Obviously that's going to be something that's quite a big issue. Ross Laidlaw's out injured at the moment. How does Marciano get his confidence back up, given that this defence that he's played in, it's the same boys for almost a year and a half, coming on 2 years now, that they seem to have gone off form. It seems to be affecting him as well. How does he get back into that mindset of, that he is one of the best goalkeepers in the league? Because I certainly believe when on form he is.
Yeah, I think that's a good question. And in the short answer, I don't know. When we look at our defensive record from the start of the season, we were conceding goals left, right and centre, but we had the depth and quality to come back on a few occasions and actually pick up points. When you look at over the past week, we conceded 2 against Rangers, 4 against Aberdeen, 2 against Celtic, 8 goals in 3 games against the top 3 opposition. Lennon's arguably got a point. It's not good enough, especially when we're paying the wages that we're paying for the quality of the defenders that we are bringing into the club. Ambrose, Whittaker, these are seasoned professionals. They're not in their infancy of their career where they're possibly folding under the pressure, playing in big games. So I think you're right. Where does Marciano go from here? He'll bounce back. I'm sure Lennon will put his arm around him and just say, look, from an individual standpoint, just focus on going out, doing what you're doing. And to be fair, actually, we can't totally lambast Marciano. Yes, he's made a couple of mistakes, but how many other games has he actually made crucial saves for us where, it's actually ended up with us either winning the match or coming back and saving points at the end of the day. So like all players, they'll have moments of inconsistency. I think the team is going through a patch of inconsistency, and it's shown through. And My gut feel for that is that some of the players are tired. I don't think the international break helped us. We had built up some really good momentum since we've came back off the international break. Hibs have been pretty inconsistent over the past 4 weeks.
Can I ask a question on that subject, just from the perspective of Neil Lennon's, the way he's conducted himself in the last wee while, especially given facing the top 3 clubs, as Mark mentioned there. Is there potential that he's actually, through some of his comments, and merely complimenting his own players a lot of time, but is there any potential that he's heaped more pressure on his players and actually put a bullseye on Hibs a wee bit in terms of the other clubs, that because he's sort of crowed quite a lot about their performances, that those other clubs have really wanted to go out and put a marker down? There was no chance of Aberdeen not being up for it on Saturday because they really had a point to prove. Has Lennon maybe mismanaged his media relations a wee bit in that sense, that beyond inspiring his own players, he's actually inspired the opposition?
I totally get your point. And when we look back to the start of the season, Lennon came out saying that we've got the second best squad in Scotland, that we're going to finish
He says
second.
it after the Aberdeen game in the Cup.
Yeah, and that is concerning. Sometimes you want to be in a position where you're just bouncing back from the Championship. We want to be in a position that arguably we over-deliver. He's in a in a position where he's managing the expectations with the fans. Coming out publicly, it was a bit of a bugbear of mine at the start, and I know he wants to build this mentality that we're winners and that we've got the depth and quality in the squad. Well, actually, Craig, you made a really valid point there. We don't have the same attacking options. With Rangers, we showed intent, but we had all 4 of our centre forwards starting. We had, Shaw, we had Stokes, we had
Murray and Boyle as well.
Murray and Boyle on, and I guess that's great to see at home against the Old Firm, showing that attacking intent, and I applaud Neil Lennon for that. I think that's fantastic. That's what I want to see if I'm paying 28 quid for a ticket, is to go and have a go at them and hope we beat them, because they are vulnerable. We know that they can be beaten. I think from your point, Sam, yes, I would agree that Lennon has probably built up and heaped more pressure, especially when you're carrying the risk that some of these seasoned professionals aren't as consistent and they aren't as arguably as good as what they were in their earlier careers. So it does probably put more pressure on Ambrose, Whittaker, Stokes to perform, but that's what they're at Easter Road for, because they're wanting to put in strong performances, and they're arguably winners. So Lennon will know his players as well. He'll know what they'll react to. He'll know what to say to get the best out of them. He's worked with a lot of them before. But I do feel that he's maybe mismanaged the expectations by saying that we were the best, second best squad in Scotland out with Celtic.
I'd sort of agree with that. I mean, I looked at, you look at the Hibs performances this season. I feel like we've only been comprehensively outplayed in one of those games, and that was the game against Hamilton at home. And I mean,
But yeah, it's just a weird misnomer when you say the words Hamilton at home.
No, I know.
I know.
But, and you look at the other games, the game against Hearts was, it was only 1-0, but it was a very comfortable 1-0. The game against Celtic at Parkhead, we arguably could have won it. The game at Easter Road, we could have won it. The game in Dundee, we should have won. You could go on and on and on and on. So I think that for Lennon to come out and say that we're the second best team or playing, the best football after Celtic is good, because it shows that he's, it doesn't come across as delusional that he's just saying this.
But
despite
we're
the
not
fact
winning. We're not winning these
no,
games.
I get that, but then the negative spin on it is that when he's coming out and saying this stuff and we're not getting the results that he's trying to justify through his comments, that makes it a big issue.
So that's my issue with the comments, is not the comments themselves, it's the timing of them. See if he makes those comments over or at the start of a run of games where you've maybe got 4 games, 4 of the next 6 at Easter Road, and they're all against teams out with the top
Ross
3,
County,
for example.
such and so
I
on.
think make that comment, because guys having that swagger is a good thing. You can go in, you can keep confidence, even if it's 0-0 with 15 minutes to go. The manager's got confidence in you that you're the guy to go out and get the win for him. I just feel like saying it publicly Because managers are always going to say that in the dressing room. What they have to make a decision of is whether they want to make it public or not. Saying it publicly just before 3 massive games, and if you include Hearts, who are in the middle of a little bit of a resurgence now, 4 massive games out of their next 5 at the time when the comments were made, it just feels like it may actually inspire the opposition at least as much as it inspires the Hibs players.
I mean, part of me just wants to say, under promise, over deliver, and you want to be in a position where, from a fan's perspective, just keep the lid on it. You know that Aberdeen are a good side. You know that Hearts, albeit you've had issues from the start of the season, have still got a good quality team there. Rangers are on the journey trying to become the second or competitive with Celtic, and they've got the financial clout to do it. You're just bouncing back. I think you're right. Timing is everything, and I'd rather have Lennon have set off from the start, saying, we're going to aim for top 6, and then let the players go out on the park, prove their bottle. And when you get inconsistent results, at least you've got that as a backstop. When the quality results do come through, then that's when you can give praise. But I do feel he put his neck on the chopping block right from the start of the season and mismanaging expectations, both with the fans, and also maybe with the players, and just how good they feel they are. Because when they're not grinding out results, that's got to affect their confidence.
Well, that was the one other question that I wanted to put to you, is because I've spoken to a couple of Hibbies today separately from the show, and they've mentioned the idea that in the lead up to the derby, which we'll go into infinite detail on next week, that they've said, well, it's ironic that the confidence of both teams is they're passing each other at the moment. So Hibs are on the way down in terms of their confidence, and Hearts are on the up. And it struck me that it was that parallel with Hearts' first season back in the Premier League when Robbie Neilson was the manager, that people find them, Hearts find themselves sitting 3rd or 4th, around about this time, and people are saying, well, things have sort of tailed off a wee bit. And as the more realistic fans or people out with the club are saying, are you mad? It's your first season back in a really competitive league, and you're in a great position. And I feel like there is maybe that Hibs, because some people allowed themselves to get a wee bit ahead of themselves, that now Hibs are sitting in a very good position in the league for a team who's just come back. It's an admirable performance that they've put in, but because expectations got so high so quickly over the first maybe 10 games or so, that actually it feels like you guys' confidence is suffering a wee bit, even though it should still, in perspective, it's still been a very good first half of the season.
It's been brilliant. It's been fantastic. And from Hibs' perspective, I think the expectation is there for Hibs to do well. You could argue that we had a Premiership quality squad in the Championship, and that it was competitive a couple of years back with both Hearts and Rangers. The expectation is that Hibs probably should have been up quicker than what they actually were. However, circumstances were different. But you do question the mentality of some of the Hibs players, especially in the what we perceive as the lower league opposition. Some of the games that Craig mentioned there, against Hamilton, etc., we seem to be turning up for the big games, albeit over the past week we've actually taken 1 point from a potential 9. Our home form for me this year has been below par, and I think that's one of the biggest frustrations as a Hibs fan, and going and watching them at Easter Road. I was hoping and would have been expecting more from Hibs at Easter Road this season.
I would agree with that. I mean, you do need to temper expectations a little bit. Regardless of what Lennon's saying, and it's been said privately and publicly. We're sitting 4th in the league.
Yeah,
we're only
9 points.
9 points off second. We're 6 points off Rangers.
Yeah.
We had a bit of a lead over Hearts. They've managed to claw that back now, as like Sam mentioned, that we're on the way down and they're on the way up. But I think you need to take into consideration a little bit. That's Celtic on the Sunday, Rangers on the Wednesday, and then Aberdeen at 12:30 on the Saturday.
It's a grueling week.
So it's not even. You're getting a game 2 days rest, a game a day's rest, travelling up north, and then an early kick-off. So it's it's disappointing this week to only take 1 point for 9. However, first season back in the, and admittedly, without letting this drag out, without a recognised goal scorer, that's not too bad going. And we've got the best way that, if we can get out this slump is obviously a massive, massive game. Obviously, we take care of the Ross County game first of all, but a massive game at Tynecastle.
Yep.
So on that, we'll wrap up on the Hibs chat. We'll throw a couple of ad breaks, and then we'll come back after the break to discuss the Hearts game against Celtic yesterday at Tynecastle. Thank you for staying tuned on Monday Night Football.
Music for Scotland. Radio Saltire.
Good evening and welcome back to Monday Night Football here live on Radio Saltire. So now we'll cross over to the Gorgie side of the city for a result I don't think anybody seen coming. Heart of Midlothian 4, the invincible, unbeatable Glasgow Celtic 0.
O ye of little faith.
Well, thanks to a photo that Mark shared last
Merry
night.
Christmas.
One very, very lucky punter stuck that on at 200-1, so it will be a very Merry Christmas for him.
Did you see one of the other Twitter feeds today on Betway or something like that? There was another guy who had ironically a Hibby, had a tenner on at 500-1, and he cashed out. He bottled it. He cashed out at 3 out for 2,600.
Even then, the bookies will still have made an absolute killing on that result.
On Celtic, anyway. Right, so Hearts 4, Celtic 0. Thoughts?
Far too many for a general question like
that.
Well,
let's start with the main talking point.
Okay.
Harry Cochrane. How good can this young man potentially be?
Well, I thought you set up that you were going to ask me what age actually is he, because
no.
you mentioned it all week. Yes, he's 16. I don't know, it's really difficult. I think the person who felt most validated yesterday by his performance, other than Harry Cochrane and Craig Levein for taking a chance on him, was Sean, because he put up a poll up at the start of the season. I don't know if people remember it, on our Twitter, on the Monday Night Football Twitter, asking if at 16 he could establish himself as a first team player. And a lot of the people, the lovely people on our Twitter, basically said, "Are you on glue? What are you talking about? He's 16, don't be so mad." And in actual fact, it showed that 16's easily old enough at this stage, at least, to put in individual performances like that. I don't know. I have to say,
we've seen so many at that age. Even 16 to 18 come through and start so brightly, and then just.
Well, there's times on the show as well. I felt like I had to be really, really careful with what I was saying, because you can't really criticise a 16-year-old kid who's only in there out of necessity because we were desperate for bodies in midfield. But there were some times where I felt like he was making poor decisions. And again, that's nothing to do with him, but there is a time when we were really struggling. You thought, can we afford a player who's got that game awareness to be able to decide when can I play football and when can I not play football? If he plays football in terms of his first touch, his ability to pivot and his ability to find a straightforward pass like he did yesterday, he can play football anywhere he wants in the spell. In terms of if he picks the ball up in the couple of positions where Prince Buaban decided to play football yesterday, where it makes people panic, Harry Cochrane was crisp enough and slick enough yesterday. He'll walk out in positions like that, no bother. I thought that was the most impressive thing. For 16, he will sometimes make the wrong decision, but I thought the form he was in yesterday, I thought even if he made the wrong decision, he would still be good enough to just play his way out of it. You love, especially with Hearts over the last few months, the paucity options in centre midfield and using players out of position, players who have turned out to be really good functional players in other positions, for example like Conor Randall. And the less said about Rafa Jelic the better maybe, although he did a wee job yesterday. But using those players, you realise that a big problem in centre midfield is you need to be able to play with your head in a swivel, and you need to be able to turn. Because the game is 360 in centre midfield, you've really got to be able to play in every area of the park. And a lot of the players we've played have either been guys who just want to play in the defensive areas or just want to play in the attacking areas, and you basically miss out a big chunk of the park. I thought what Cochrane showed yesterday was an ability to play with his head on a swivel and to be able to just turn the game completely. So he picked up a ball in what seemed like a meaningless position, swivelled and suddenly opened up 10 yards of space for himself. And that is something that, as a team who I think for a while now, has been sort of short of real quality in the centre of the park. We've had wee cameos from people. You know, Jim looked great for 6 months and is still okay, but not quite the player we had hoped for. Miguel Pallardo looked great for a while, but we've not really had a linchpin in the centre midfield. Again, I'm not saying he can do that right now, but he certainly looks like a guy that in 2 years' time will be, a Hearts team will be absolutely built round him on the basis of what he showed he could do yesterday.
I thought it was a very, you know, it's easy for, you know, 16-year-olds, 17-year-olds, 18-year-olds to come into a team and, you know, show that almost callousness. But I thought he showed a real maturity on his head. I mean, you look at his goal, for example. I don't think from watching him yesterday, 16-year-old, I didn't even know if he's right or left-footed.
Yep.
You know, there's parts in the game where he's picking out passes with his right, but yet he scores a goal with his left. And I thought the best part about the goal wasn't the shot. When you look at it, the way that he receives the ball on the half turn, and it just completely sets it up absolutely perfectly for him. You would expect to see that from a John McGinn or from a Tom Rogic. Do you know what I mean? That's the kind of thing that those players do. Not a 16-year-old making one of his first appearance. You know, making what was it, 7th or 8th appearance in the first team.
Do you think, Sam? Do you think that Celtic underestimated his capabilities yesterday? Do you think, you know, they were too standoffish, not giving him enough respect, and thinking, oh, just a young laddie, doesn't really know, we don't know his quality?
To be honest, I don't really think it matters, and I think I think that about quite a lot of the game yesterday. Obviously, there's going to be focus on Celtic being poor, and in certain individual scenarios, particularly, they were poor. There was a couple of chances they could have done a lot better with. There was certainly instances of defending where they could have been better, but I still just think Celtic went in with a game plan the way they did for every other game, and their midfields have dominated more experienced midfields than ours. Their midfields have dictated games without necessarily having, you know, I don't think they would have gone in with a specific game plan to deal with really any of Hearts players yesterday. Maybe Kyle Lafferty, but even then, the Hearts team's changed so often that actually that was, as we saw yesterday, it was one of those weaknesses that actually, as soon as you saw how up for it the Hearts team were, and how Craig Levein had finally potentially found a tactic that worked, it actually became a real strength of that Hearts team, because no one could have prepared for that, because we were sitting in there as guys who have watched this team play 20 times together, or the bulk of the team play this season round about 20 times, and saying, where did that come from? So there's no way that Brendan Rodgers or Celtic could have prepared for that. Now the challenge for Hearts now will be, can you get that performance every game from now on, and secondly, can you deal with the fact that teams are now expecting that and will be able to prepare for that?
Yeah. My only two observations on two of the goals. When you look at Lafferty's goal,
Gordon should never be getting beaten for there.
Correct.
In my opinion, that is a terrible goal for.
And you could put Lafferty, in my opinion, in the exact same position 100 times, and I think he would, you know, draw the ball across goal and miss it 98 times out of 100. And
I think it's totally irrelevant, because those 98 might be in training.
No, we've just been talking about tempering expectations, you know, from a Hibs perspective in the first half of the show.
I think expectations have been tempered greatly enough for Hibs this season. I think it's different. It is different when you talk about Hibs, though, because, I mean, Richard Gordon, who has been criticised at various points in the recent past for not necessarily giving Hearts the credit that people felt they were deserved. They felt like, since certain instances, Solly Mikalunas, things like that Richard Gordon doesn't necessarily have a real fondness for Hearts. Even he said yesterday, when observing the league table after the Hearts result, you know, you look at that and Hearts are suddenly 3 points off Hibs, and look at the differing coverage that both teams have had this season. And that is really a thing, and we're going to talk about this ad infinitum next week, so I didn't want to get into it too much, but while I completely agree with you, Mark, you have to temper expectations to say not every game is going to be 4-0 against Celtic now. You're not going to get that performance all the time. I think Hearts have had enough of tempering expectations, and actually the fans have done too much of it. The fans too often, we've sat in the studio and had to deal with the question of how little quality is actually in the Hearts team. And at times we've had to say, well, no as little as there is in the Hamilton team or the Partick team. So the idea of drawing with those teams is not justified by just saying this Hearts team lacks quality. It's justified because the Hearts team's got more quality than them. I think what we saw yesterday was a realisation of that quality. And yes, we probably saw more of the 11 realise it on one day than we will potentially ever see again.
Yeah.
Because days like that didn't happen very often. I was speaking about it with a few of my mates after and sort of said, can you remember off the top of your head a better, more all-round team performance by a Hearts team? And it's really difficult. They didn't all spring to mind. Even cup finals and things like that, there was times in that game where Hearts weren't always at it, or there was individual errors and things like that. Literally yesterday, I find it really difficult. Like I said, Prince had a couple of his wee moments where he wants a wee bit too long on the ball. Apart from that, I literally find it. There was that one Griffiths chance where Michael Smith gravitated towards his own goal line and he should have went with Griffiths, but he's a right back playing at centre half. It feels ridiculously harsh to actually criticise any moment of that game. So I think in that sense, Hearts fans they have to allow themselves to get a wee bit carried away with that, because all season the discussion has been about how limited the Hearts squad is.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think I don't think it would be unfair to say that Hearts played fantastic yesterday without playing fantastic football. What I mean by that is, they didn't pass Celtic to death. They didn't play them as such off the park. What they've done what a lot of teams should have done recently is, and I was saying it to my mates before the game, press Boyata high, press Simonovic high, make him go back to Gordon and make Gordon kick it. Because ultimately that first Hearts goal comes from, I know the Celtic fans were mucking about with the ball, but it leads to a goal kick because of the confusion, to which Hearts then get a throw in and then end up scoring from.
Yeah.
Putting pressure on the centre halves that high up the park. I mean, look how high they were for Lafferty's goal. Lafferty's hit that ball for a good 25, going up to 30 yards.
Yeah.
And without, I don't want to sound like I'm a bit heavy by criticising the Hearts' performance, because I genuinely I agree with you, Sam. I don't think you can. There is no individual, like you say, Blabbin had these wee moments where he likes too much time on the ball and likes to sort of faff around with it a wee bit. But ultimately, man for man, that Hearts team was just fantastic.
The only thing I would say about that idea, Hearts did match Celtic physically yesterday in a way that a lot of teams haven't, and a lot of times Hearts haven't. Guys like Ross Callaghan maybe didn't have his best game on the ball, but every time there was a 50-50 ball in the centre of the park, he was there throwing his head at it and putting his body in the way. And there was a lot of tussles where in previous you've seen Scott Brown muscle his way through and shrug players off, and that just didn't happen yesterday. There was a persistence to Hearts and there was a physical presence to them. However, I don't agree with this, the narrative that BBC Scotland put on it a little bit in terms of Hearts playing quite a direct game. I think, yes, Lafferty was there to be a target man and there was the odd occasion where he was used on that basis, but I remember Hearts equally playing quite a few quick 1-2s in the centre of the park, using Harry Cochrane to get on the ball. He wasn't man of the match because he scored a goal. He was man of the match because he was involved in the play a lot of time. And the big thing there, I think, is you don't beat Celtic without composure. I don't think you do, because the ball comes back to you too quickly. I thought there was one period in the game where Hearts a couple of times shelled it. And it was because Lafferty he was having that wee Wayne Rooney moment where he gets the red face and he decides, actually, I'm going to go back and harry and tackle. And the problem is he goes back and he puts good graft in and he won a couple of throw-ins and things in our own half. But then we win the ball and we look for him to get us out because we were maybe under the cosh a wee bit then, and he's no there. And psychologically, you can't afford to do that against Celtic. You can't afford to win it back and give it straight back to them, because that's when you feel like this is the Alamo and we're never going to get out here. And actually, I've seen that a million times with Hearts, and you feel like the goal is coming. And that didn't happen on Sunday because, as Craig Levine alluded to in his post-match comments, either Hearts came up with a big chance or a goal there to kill Celtic's momentum, or I felt like they just actually composed themselves a wee bit again and just used the ball and find some passes. And I think someone like Milinkovic was absolutely vital for that, because he was just never rattled. I mean, if you take his goals out of it even, the couple of wee moments even in the first half where he just lit up the game with a wee bit of close control and skill.
Sinclair and Tierney, I think it was,
he
on the
went past
left-hand
Tierney
side.
and then Boyata goes to tackle him and he just goes past
Boyata,
him as well, and then throws the ball into the middle. And he was unlucky with the cross, to be fair, but I just think it was guys like that in moments like that that showed that we're not going to be intimidated here. I'm going to play my game and I'm going to play it to the level that every Hearts player did there. At no point did Hearts result to shelling the ball into corners or...
Because you didn't have to, though.
No, there was a couple of moments where they dropped deeper where there was maybe 5 or 10 minute spells, mostly in the second half, where Hearts were sitting probably a wee bit too deep for all of our hearts. But well, firstly, it never amounted to anything, so there was never a real concern. And secondly, either something happened in the game that actually inspired them to push on a wee bit and give them another few yards in the legs, or there was a tactical reorganisation that happened and Hearts just went back to the game plan again. And I think that Craig Levein can't get enough praise for what happened yesterday. And yes, we have to temper it with the fact that it is only one game. And yes, in terms of that performance, it's maybe been a long time coming, because although Hearts have had some decent results lately, the performance hasn't always been that consistent, at least not for a full 90. But it's not often that you see a team put in as complete a performance against one of the best teams in this league. And I think that every individual player deserves credit for it, but equally, Craig Levein with what was an absolute mismatch of options. I mean, it was...
You had your centre mid at right back at centre back. Jamie Brandon's obviously played quite a few positions this season.
Yeah.
You know, Milinkovic, you know, Boavin's been much maligned by the Hearts support. You know, Cochrane in there for his first, you know, that's probably his first big test. I know he played against Rangers.
As well, but
I know he played against Rangers at Murrayfield, but you know, playing Rangers at Murrayfield is a lot different to playing Celtic at Tynecastle. And then you've got Lafferty up top, who's had his critics this season as well. You know, I thought he led the line superbly yesterday, and he's really, you know, I don't know if it's maybe just that big game player. You know, we spoke at the start of the season about, you know, when Hearts signed Lafferty and Hibs signed Stokes, we've signed these big game players. And well, yesterday was the real chance for Lafferty to show that he is a big game player.
I think the big thing to consider on that front as well is the start of the game, and I think guys like Lafferty played a massive part in that. Don Cowie as well, the harrying right from the start. Hearts putting pressure on the Celtic backline straight away. Yes, that was a feature of the whole game, but it set the tone really early, and this, we've spoken about it a lot. This Hearts support just now can be fractured. It can be quite divided because people have very different opinions on where they want the club to go and who they want to be in control of where the club goes. That was all forgotten after 2 or 3 minutes, where you see Don Cowie hassling Craig Gordon and nearly getting in, and Kyle Lafferty being wrongly flagged for offside when he was in on goal. And there was moments there early on where you thought, we're not also hands in this game. And I think most of us had thought, you know, if we get through the first 20, then maybe see, because Celtic weren't really necessarily at it last week against Hibs. None of that played any part in it. Hearts simply exploded out the blocks, got Tynecastle onside, and that was the real christening of that new stand. You saw the old Tynecastle atmosphere, and that's the most united I've felt the Hearts support in a number of years, probably since somewhere in that championship season, in terms of everyone was on the same page, everyone was absolutely loving it, and there was definitely a respect for the players. You know, even if we had conceded a couple of goals at the end and it had gone a bit wobbly or anything like that, there had been so much respect earned for the individuals as part of that game, it wouldn't have mattered. It was great that didn't happen. And of course, we now have to go and get someone against St Johnstone, preferably match Hibs' result against St Johnstone and make that derby a real 6-pointer where the winner will be sitting above the other. And as always in football now, if it seems great, everyone on kickback is right behind Craig Levein now, a lot of people eating humble pie, but he's really only got a 10-day reprieve, because as we'll talk about next week, the derby now becomes massive, because everyone you've got on side, if you lose that, especially if you lose it meekly, then this all turns around again, and the question marks are hanging over your head again. But in terms of changing the feeling around the club, in terms of changing the momentum going into that game, and it is a big game in everyone's calendar, I think, but especially for Hearts, who have been sort of meandering a wee bit up until the last week or so, to change the momentum so drastically going into that game. There's now a feeling that we've given ourselves a blueprint to go into any future big games, that if it can do that to Celtic, why can it not do that to anyone else? And I really do feel that while other teams will be better prepared for it now, it's given us a confidence that was not there previously.
No, absolutely, and I think you know, it's like you say, the key thing is now is whether you can go to St Johnstone and not, you know, because you're not going to get that performance every week. you'd be lucky if you get that sort of performance maybe even 2-3 times in a season. But the key is taking that momentum for the result and pushing on. Obviously, we're given that St Johnstone got a good result at Ibrox at the weekend as well.
Well, I think the focus goes on to individuals. So we've now, in theory, got a structure in place that allows players to go out and do what they do best and help each other and complement each other. It now becomes a question of, if we say we had probably 10 of the starting 11 at their peak on Saturday, or Sunday, sorry, if next week we only have 4 or 5 at their peak, which is probably a more normal amount, is that enough to beat a team like St Johnstone? If we go into the game against Hibs and we have 4 or 5, is that structure enough that is enough for us to compete in those games? Or did it only work yesterday because we had 10 players at the best? That's a big question that remains to be seen. But I think because of the confidence we've gained for yesterday, there's far more chance of having a greater number of players at their best over the next couple of important games that we've got going into the winter break. And we're now looking at a transfer window full of optimism rather than desperation. So rather than looking at a transfer window where we think, well, we basically need a new team, we're now thinking, well, actually, based on that, if we can get a couple of wee solid options or a couple of options to be rotated in to keep other guys' fitness, maybe there is more of a core of a squad with us at the moment than we've had before. And I do think, I have to say, there's a couple of guys over the last few games who have grown into it and have shown that they are, I think, considerably better than other people thought they were. Conor Randall, you mentioned, being used in centre midfield a lot and being brought in. Ian Cathro mentioned that as a centre midfielder. He's not a centre midfielder, he's a right back. Liverpool fans told us when it came in, and it's proven to be absolutely spot on. And if he keeps anywhere near the performance of the last couple of games, I can't see him being ousted from right back at any stage. Michael Smith is the same. John Suter will have a fight on his hands because Michael Smith was so comfortable letting Christoph Berra do what he was good at and then doing the stuff Berra's not great at, like attacking in channels, tracking Griffiths into areas where Berra would be very uncomfortable, and going and staying with them and scrapping and winning the ball and doing the no-nonsense stuff, putting out for throw-ins and things like that. John McLaughlin, I mean, it was a 4-0 win, so it seems daft to talk about how good the keeper was. It seems like it makes it quite negative, like we were under the cosh more than we were. But McLaughlin has steadied our back four so much. If you think of that makeshift back four with Jack Hamilton behind him, and no disrespect to Jack, but he is a bit of a chaos factor. It wouldn't have been as settled as it was.
Yep.
With McLaughlin there, Smith was able to just concentrate on defending. He didn't have to worry about communicating with the goalie, and it just all happened naturally. And I think then you look at the forward options, you look at the fact that actually, Cole Stockton only came on for the sort of last 15 minutes because Lafferty's race was won, but Isma didn't even get on. Mm-hmm. June was injured. Those are two of the more important attacking players in a Hearts team that has been struggling for creativity at points, and they didn't even feature at all in a game where Hearts scored 4. That was unthinkable. I mean, Jamie Walker's injured, and a lot of people would have had the hopes for Hearts for every game pinned to Jamie Walker and his creativity, and he was nowhere to be seen on Sunday. I think that is the biggest positive. We all had faith that Craig Levein would make the back line much better, would improve Hearts defensively, and I think now Hearts are sitting with potentially the best defensive record in the league. What we weren't sure, and what no one could be absolutely certain of, is could Craig Levein allow the attacking players to flourish and find goals, and I think now you're starting to see he has been able to do that, and I think that's the cause for the excitement, is if we can keep the defence the way it is and keep ourselves in games, then we now know we can score goals. We can find ways to win games, and that's what was missing. If you look at the first derby of the season at Easter Road, when Hearts go down early, and then you're looking at the last 25 minutes or so, as a supporter, you want to appear that you're confident and you want to stay behind the team, but there wasn't that much confidence that we had an individual who could pop up with a goal. Hopes were pinned to Lafferty and guys like that, but really without any real evidence to say that he would come up big. Yeah. Now, I think you can look at Lafferty and Milinkovic and even Cochrane and Ross Callaghan and guys like that and say they probably do have the character to come up in a big moment.
No, definitely. I think that, like you say, there's a lot to look forward to for Hearts. It's now the results of the last week have meant that the next week and a half for both Edinburgh clubs is massive.
Well, just one final point is those sort of positive and negative stats where it depends which way you want to look at it. So the funniest stat I think is I think Hearts are sitting on 27 points in the Premier League now, which means that a third of the entire season points tally has been accrued within the last 9 days. Now, that's either a mega positive stat if you want to look at the run of form we're on just now, or an incredibly negative stat that we only managed to pick up 2/3 of that point tally over the previous 3.5 months of the season.
15 games or whatever.
Aye, either way, it's in terms of the momentum, it has massively changed, and as we say, it all comes down to who's got the confidence and who can go out. Saturday becomes massive. We'll talk about after we've spoken to Nick and preview the games, but carrying on that momentum now is massive for Hearts.
Definitely. So like Sam says, what we're going to do is we're going to throw to another couple of ad breaks just now, and when we come back we'll be joined live on the phone with former Hibs and Republic of Ireland goalkeeper Nick Colgan. Thank you for staying tuned on Monday Night Football on Radio Saltire.
Music for Scotland. Radio Saltire.
Good evening and welcome back to Monday Night Football on Radio Saltire. Now hopefully we're joined live on the phone with former Hibs goalkeeper Nick Colgan. Nick, are you there?
Hiya, Craig. How are you?
Excellent. Perfect. Thanks, mate. I'm very good. How are you?
Yeah, I'm very well. Thanks very much.
Perfect. So just to obviously start with, if you could let us know sort of what you've been up to. You know, it's been a while since you were up in Edinburgh, part of the Hibs squad. What have you been doing with yourself recently?
Yeah, recently I'm actually head of goalkeeping at Wigan Athletic at the moment. Finished my playing career about 5 years ago. Finished at Huddersfield and went straight into the coaching side. Always been sort of a student of the game and obviously loved the goalkeeping coaching side of stuff. So I was very fortunate that when I finished playing at Huddersfield, it was at the birth of the EPPP down in England, the players system down here that all the clubs had to adhere to. So they were looking for an academy goalkeeping coach. I was obviously coming to the end of my playing career, and they offered me the job, which I jumped at because it's something that I always wanted to do and had been doing while I was still playing towards the end, coaching at Barnsley and places like that in their academy. And then, fortunate enough, when Mark Robbins was the manager, he invited me up to work with the first team, which I was until the middle of June. We were lucky enough to get promoted to the Premier League at Wembley at the end of May, and then unfortunately I lost my job in the middle of June, but lucky enough to get back into work straight away with Wigan.
So how does that feel for you now? Obviously you've went full circle. You know, at one point you were the young goalkeeper getting mentored by the senior goalkeepers and then the goalkeeping coach, and now you're, you know, in the position that you were in, say, 20, 25 years ago. How different is that for you?
Do you know what? It's probably something that I always wanted to do. I was quite fortunate that when I joined Chelsea as a 17-year-old, the goalkeeping coach at the time was Eddie Nijvicki, and he kind of took me under his wing a little bit. So he used to say to me, rather than go home to your digs in the evening, come and help me with the academy. So a couple of nights a week I'd help Eddie with the young keepers. So it was probably ingrained in me from a very early age. And I'm from a family of teachers. I've got two sisters who are teachers. My dad was a teacher. So it's something I've always loved. I've always loved the art of goalkeeping. Always been a student of the game, always studied it. So I think it was just a natural progression.
So like you mentioned there, Nick, you started your career, your professional career anyway, at Chelsea. You know, as a young goalkeeper, going up against the likes of, say, Gianfranco Zola, Gianluca Vialli, day in, day out in training, how much did that help your development as a young goalkeeper?
Well, it was slightly different because when I joined Chelsea, it was in 1990. So I kind of came into a squad there that was full of seasoned professionals, like Dave Besant, Dennis Wise, Vinnie Jones, Andy Townsend, Kerry Dixon, Gordon Jury, Steve Clark, people like that, you know, people with vast experience. And it wasn't really until I think I was on my, it was a fourth manager. Bobby Campbell signed me, Ian Porterfield then came in for Bobby Campbell, then we had Dave Webb. It was only really when Glenn Huddle took over as manager at Chelsea that the revolution really started there. And the likes of your Zolas, your Di Matteos, your Hullets, your Vialis came in. And to be honest, I mean, it really opened your eyes as to, you know, the other side of football, the European side. Before then, there was obviously laws in place that you could only have a certain amount of foreigners in your squad and everything. But when that was relaxed and, you know, the foreigners started to come in, I mean, the quality of foreigner that Chelsea was able to bring in at the time was was outstanding, and people like Zola in particular, and Vialli, they were the ultimate professionals. They were doing stuff before training to prepare themselves. They were doing stuff after training. They were doing extras on the training ground, and it really opened everybody's eyes to the way football should be going. And that was great credit to someone like Glenn Hoddle, who had obviously been out in Monaco and played a lot of football, on the continent, and obviously was a household name in England. But it's great credit to him that he could attract the likes of these players to the club. But it was brilliant for all the young players of the club to see it.
Well, yeah, obviously, and then you go to Glenn Hoddle gets replaced by Ruud Gullit, and then it gets to March 1997, and Nick Colgan becomes a Premier League goalkeeper. What was that feeling like, finding out that you were going to be starting a game, especially when you look at the team that you were up against? Because obviously, the rivalry down there between Chelsea and West Ham can get a bit feisty at times.
Yeah. I would like to say eventually it came. I mean, I've been there for quite some time, and it was quite a frustrating time, to be honest, because each manager that came in seemed to like what they saw, in a young Irish goalkeeper that was there, and keep on getting offered new contracts. When I look back, I kind of wish that I'd made the break from Chelsea a little bit earlier, to forge a career and to. But when managers are coming in and offering you new deals and saying you're going to be part of their plans, you kind of buy into what they say. But yeah, eventually it was kind of 7 years after and a few loans down the line that you make your debut for your parent club. But it was quite funny. I mean, Ruud Gullit just popped his head into the young boys' changing room the day before the game, and excuse my language here, he just pointed at me and he went, he said, you will play tomorrow, don't shit yourself. So I do apologise for the language. They were his exact words. And it was just, go out and play. It was obviously a huge rivalry between West Ham and Chelsea. It's a game that I kind of look back on now, and I don't particularly remember much. I remember we got beaten by a last-minute goal by Paul Kitson. But I don't really remember much. So now on the coaching side, you kind of look back, and every young boy that goes and makes his debut, you say, listen, make sure you take everything in. Make sure you have a look around. You survey your environment. You get as much out of today as possible. And obviously, in today's environment, they get all the DVDs, they get all the clips that they play in. They get to keep their shirts and all that type of stuff. But back in the day, it was go out, play the game, and afterwards, what will be, will be.
Well, like you mentioned there, Nick, you had quite a few loan spells while you were at Chelsea. It was never a sustained period where you made, even got into double figures in appearances. Was there a particular reason for that at the time? Not really. I mean, I think I went to Crewe, Millwall and Grimsby, but I was kind of 18, 19 at the time, and I was going there as a number two. They only had one goalkeeper, and going there as a number two. Looking back, they were great experiences for me. To move out of London. I mean, it was a huge change in my life to actually go from Drogheda in Ireland to a cosmopolitan city like London. I mean, I was lost for the first few months. Didn't have a clue how to get anywhere. In Drogheda, we walked or cycled everywhere, and to go to London was a huge eye opener. But then to go to different areas of the country, when I went to Crewe, that was good. I had to stay up there for a month. Grimsby, the manager left in the month I was there, so that was an experience. I wasn't even in the team, and the manager left to go to West Brom. He was headhunted by West Brom. A new manager came in and wanted to bring in his own keeper. And then had the great experience of going to Millwall, and it was my first experience of working under Mick McCarthy, who I was fortunate enough, obviously, to work under with Ireland later on in my career. But that was a real good experience. Brentford and Reading needed a goalkeeper for a month each time because their goalkeeper was out injured. So all good experiences, but frustrating because never really got the run of games that I wanted, and I knew I was creeping along in age as well and needed to sort of bed down some roots somewhere. Well, which you did do. Obviously you had your spell at Bournemouth where you failed to make an appearance, and then all of a sudden the offer comes to you to come up to Scotland and join Hibs. How did the offer from Hibs come about initially?
Do you know what? I'm not all that sure. I know that Mel Meechan was the manager of Bournemouth at the time, and when I left Chelsea and joined Bournemouth, a lot of promises were made that sort of didn't really materialise. Bournemouth actually was a lovely place. I can totally understand why a lot of the people who were there at my time are actually still there. Eddie Howe is there, who's obviously manager of Bournemouth now. Jason Tyndall, who is assistant. Steve Fletcher, who was a striker down there. He's one of the heads of recruitment at Bournemouth now. Absolutely lovely place. My son was born down in Bournemouth. He was actually born on the last day of the season down there. So he was born on the 8th of May, and by the middle of June I was up having talks with Alex McLeish about a move to Hibs. You know, I wasn't particularly looking to move to Scotland, but I was certainly looking to get, you know, to play first team football. And when I came up and spoke to Alex at the time and saw the facilities and saw what Hibs had to offer, I was gagging to jump at the chance.
When you signed, we still had Ollie Got Scalxon at the time. You know, and you had to wait sort of a while to actually make your first team debut.
Yeah.
Did you have a feeling of almost like, here we go again? You know, that you've had, you know, these spells, like you say with Bournemouth, there was a lot of broken promises. Were you brought in on the pretense of being first choice right away, or was it a case of Ollie's the first choice?
No. I mean, Alex was very, very, very upfront. He said he had Ollie. He said he wanted someone to really push him and to ultimately push him out of the team. I said I was up for the challenge. For me, you know, the move to Hibs was make or break for my career. That was it. I mean, had I not started to get into the Hibs team and start to play, then you know I was getting towards my mid-20s, you know, 25, 26, with sort of, you know, not even 50 appearances under my belt, you know, for loan clubs and all that type of stuff. So, you know, I was getting to the stage where I needed to put down roots. I needed to show people that I was a capable keeper, and eventually got a chance.
Well, see, once you made your first appearance for the club, you didn't look back. What was it like, first of all, getting the chance to, you know, become a first choice goalkeeper for the first time in your career, but also playing with a defence of the calibre of players like Frank Soze, Ulrich Lawson at the time? You know, did that give you even more confidence in your own abilities at being the guy behind them?
Yeah, I think you know, if I look back to the Hibs team that I first went into, with some real sort of big characters in there. I mean, like Yogi was obviously there, Sean Dennis, Pat McGinley. Frank was actually playing in midfield in my first season. So Frank didn't really start playing at the back until probably the beginning of the next season. So, you know, to have sort of Sean and Yogi playing in front of you, who would head everything and kick everything that, you know, would come their way. Great characters, great to have around the dressing room. I think we had Derek Collins and Tom Smith were the two fullbacks at the time as well. So I mean, you know, the big sort of, you know, change at Hibs for me was the following season, was when, you know, your Ulrich Larssons, your John O'Neills, your Didier Gats, your people like that came into the club. You know, along with people like Gary Smith, Paul Fennick, who were seasoned pros, who were, you know, real good players, and players who allowed Frank and Russell to do what they did for the team.
Yeah, I mean, you know, like you say, the start of that season, the 2000-2001 season, was there a sort of feeling of anticipation in the squad when, you know, you seen the calibre of players that had joined? You know, we had players like David Zatelli had joined. Yeah. You know, up front with Mixu, you know, like you say, you had players like John O'Neill, Russell Latapi still pulling the strings in midfield. Yeah. Obviously, Frank making the move back to defence. Was there a real feeling within the squad that, you know, that squad could go on and do something that season? Do
you know what? I think at the beginning of every season, if you ask any team in the league, they'll think, do you know what, we could do something this year. And I think really it was after the first 5 games where I think we were top of the league, and people were going, oh, hang on a minute, you know, we're all right here. You know, we were dispatching teams for fun. I think we beat Rangers at home. We beat Dundee in the opening game. Was it 5-1 or something like that? So, but I think it was really after the first 5 games when we thought we could actually really do something this season.
Yeah, I mean, you know, thinking back as a fan, I would agree. You know, there was the start of that season we started with a 0-0 draw at Tynecastle.
That's right, yeah.
That Didier Agat ultimately, I think he missed an open goal that game.
He was rubbish, wasn't he?
And then proceeded to score, what was it, 4 in 5 games before he made the quick trip west to Celtic.
Right. He didn't stay with us long, did he?
No, it was only, I think it was October, and actually I remember it fairly well because it was when it was obviously the old stand was still there.
Yeah.
And the seat that I had was in the famous 5 upper right at the front. And I think it was the Dundee game where we beat them 5-1 and Agat scored 2, and he was unplayable. He was unbelievable.
Yeah, he certainly was.
And everyone sort of sitting in our area spotted Martin O'Neill coming out.
We shouldn't have let him in.
I know we shouldn't have let him in. We shouldn't have let Agat out. Should have signed him with the longest deal possible at the time. But looking at your, that season, like you say, was fairly memorable, culminating, probably the one result that Hibs fans still look back on with great fondness, and that was the 6-2 game at Easter Road against Hearts.
Yeah.
First of all, what was that like to play, a game of that magnitude, in front of the telecameras? What was it like?
Well, let me tell you first and foremost, it's not my favourite derby.
What's your favourite?
So, my favourite's the 3-0 from my first season, the Millennium Derby.
Sosie and Sosie, Lehman and Miller.
That's it. Yeah, my favourite derby by far. So people always on about this sort of 6-2. I remember conceding, two goals. I remember them scoring early, Hearts in that game, and then scoring late on, which was obviously disappointing. Listen, everybody looks back at that. Brilliant team, great performance. What a night! The goals, the replay, Russell's volley. But for me, when I look back, on derby games in particular, the one I look back on with immense joy was the Millennium Derby, the 3-0 win at Tynecastle, because the team we had in comparison to the Hearts team at that time was, it was just full of players who had dogged determination, who had a real will to win. Certainly didn't want to lose to probably a more expensive, a better paid. And they probably thought that they were much better than us Hearts team at the time. So for me to play in my first derby at Tynecastle, keep a clean sheet, and for us to win 3-0 with 3 great goals in a freezing cold evening just before Christmas, I look back on that as my favourite derby by far. Not to say that I didn't enjoy the 6-2, obviously.
Well, I guess being a goalkeeper, you're going to look at yourself and think, we might have won 6-2, but you've conceded 2 goals. I've
conceded 2 goals, yeah. To be fair, I wasn't really thinking that at about midnight that night when we'd had a few beers down us after the game. So,
And do you know what? I think that second Hearts goal is one of the only times you've probably ever seen a Hibs crowd celebrate a Hearts goal at Easter Road. And that.
Yeah, never again.
That sarcastic kind of tone. But that.
Yeah.
Almost, the 6-2 game in particular almost set the tone for that season. We got great results. There was games against Celtic, Rangers. We beat at Easter Road. I think it was either the week leading up to the 6-2 or it was the week after we beat Rangers 1-0.
Yeah,
and yourself as well. You made 38 appearances in the league and managed to keep 19 clean sheets, which I believe at the time was an SPL record for us. In that particular season.
Yeah.
What was it that was so special about that Hibs team to play in?
Well, do you know what? As a goalkeeper, I mean, and people will say sort of goalkeeper since and all that type of stuff. A lot of goalkeepers are defined by the people that they play behind, and we had a great work ethic. And it wasn't just, say it was, for argument's sake, when the gaffer played 3 at the back, and it was Fenwick, Smith, and Soze, with the 2 wing backs, of whether it was Lovell and Larson or whoever it was. The work ethic was all over the pitch. From Mixu as a striker, who would work his absolute knackers off for you up front. There was just a real determination, a real will to win, a real togetherness, and a real belief in each other. There was a trust and a belief, and I think that comes obviously from winning. It comes from knowing that you've got players on the pitch who can at times make a difference that nobody else can. A Soze, a Latipi, a Patalainen, people like that. A John O'Neill who if you didn't have a Russell Latipi in the team, would everybody be raving about a John O'Neill. So we had a real good squad of players, and at the end of it, wins breed confidence, and we got off to a great start, as you say, winning the derby games, feeling as though you're going into games and, do you know what, this team have got to do something special to beat us. Whoever we're playing against, they've got to do something special to beat us.
Nick, hi, it's Mark. I'm sitting in the studio alongside Craig here. Coming into that season, the last 11 games of the season, we only won once. In your opinion, what happened towards the end of the 2000-2001 season? As Hibs fans, we regularly we tend to, in the second half of the season, fall away. We have great starts. It happened under John Hughes, it happened under John Collins, and certainly under McLeish that season. We were great for the first 20 games of the season, and then the second half of the season, things just fall away. I mean,
I think just sort of sustaining it. If you've got a squad and a big enough squad and a quality enough squad capable of pushing and sustaining and getting in between the old firm. But unfortunately, a lot of budgets dictate that, you don't. You have a nucleus of possibly 14, 15, 16 players that you can rely on, and at any time you can put them in, they're not going to let you down. And then as the season sort of tails off towards the end, maybe people's focus sort of changes a little bit towards the cup and stuff like that. Which obviously is disappointing. We obviously missed Russell in the final as well. But the manager makes a decision on that, and you go with it. So disappointing then, considering that we were up there fighting, as high as we could for quite a number of weeks of the season. But to tail off at the end is obviously disappointing.
Just to touch on the cup final, Nick.
Yeah.
Obviously, like you just mentioned about Russell Latipi, he obviously left the club.
Yeah.
There was also the issue with Frank Sosie not being fully fit.
Yeah.
What would you say was more of an impact on this? Was there a massive impact on the squad with what happened to Russell?
Were we a better team with Russell in it? Yes, we were.
100%.
So there's no argument. There's nobody. Alex McLeish, nobody could argue that we were better. But when you kind of come on this side of the fence, on the coaching side, and you see everything that goes on in football that you don't see as a player or you don't see as a supporter, and Alex obviously thought a line had been crossed, and he decided that it was best for the club if Russell wasn't involved. And you come on this side and you can totally see that was the right choice to make. As a player, you want your best players out there, but you can't ill discipline obviously cost Russell a place in the final, and possibly who knows what it would cost. We could have lost anyway in the day. I think Frank being injured and not being fully fit. I think he'd done his hamstring a couple of weeks before, which was obviously a big sort of blow. And Frank was prepared to do anything to get on that pitch that day. It kind of wasn't to be. You kind of look back and your what ifs or whatever, but disappointing all round.
The season finishing third was something, after we'd only been relegated a year or two before.
Yeah.
Getting to a cup final, I think that was the last Celtic team before the current one to win a treble. So it's not as if we were, up against minnows. We were up against arguably the best side in the country at the time. Leading into the following season, we got into the UEFA Cup. What was that like as an experience, going over to Athens in that sort of atmosphere and that hostility?
Well, you know what? I kind of look back and I have I've really mixed feelings on that. I think we were meant to travel out to Athens just after 9/11.
Yeah, my dad and granddad were actually on the flight that had literally just taken off.
Right. Okay. So we were on the tarmac, ready to take off.
Yeah.
And then obviously we got word through that the games had been cancelled and everything. And we went over to play the following week, and it was a real horrible, nasty atmosphere in Athens. We obviously trained the night before the game at the stadium, got a feel for it, but nothing could have prepared you for what was to come. Sort of the UEFA and the match officials were trying to have a minute's silence in respect to the people who died at 9/11. And the AEK fans were burning American flags and chanting and hollering all the way through it. So it was a real sort of hostile atmosphere. We obviously came out of the game with a 2-0 defeat, with everything to do with the home game. But the home game on totally different level. Goes down as the best atmosphere I've ever played in. I've been lucky enough to represent my country a few times. I've been lucky enough to be involved in playoff finals in England, both as a coach and a player. And AEK Athens, even when I think about it now, when Sunshine and Leith is playing before the game and everything, the hairs stand up on the back of my neck.
The exact same with me and Mark just now that you've mentioned it.
Yeah, it is the best atmosphere I have ever witnessed in my career. And I'm just so disappointed that we couldn't go through on the night because our performance warranted it. I think the Greeks said afterwards that they couldn't believe the athleticism, the enthusiasm of the players. They expected us to blow up after 20 minutes, 25 minutes with all our pressing and harrying. And they couldn't believe that we kept it going for 90 minutes. And had Paco scored with the header in the last minute, we'd be, we could be talking about a little sort of Cup Winners' Cup run at the time. But unfortunately, it wasn't to be. But I look back on that as I say, the best atmosphere I have ever played in, and obviously played in some great derby games. West Ham beat Chelsea, Hibs Hearts, everything. Cup finals and playoff finals, but that hands down is the best atmosphere I've ever played in.
I don't think many would disagree with you, Nick. Going forward after the AEK Athens game, Alex McLeish headed west to Rangers.
Yep.
With Alex being the manager that brought you up, how did that affect you personally and also the squad as a whole when he went to arguably a team that we were trying to challenge at the time?
Yeah, we were disappointed. We're obviously disappointed. I mean, I think Donald Park took over straight away. I think it was ironic. Our next game was against Rangers at Ibrox, I believe. I think we drew 1-1.
1-0, yeah.
I think Paul Fennick might have scored an own goal that night. Memory's not the best, but I think that's what happened. But
certainly better than mine.
Yeah, it was obviously disappointing. I mean, Alec had obviously brought everybody to the club, that was there. We thought that we could still kick on and do more, but disappointing. The club decided to appoint Frank. And looking back, I don't know whether we're going to talk about any regrets later on in the interview. One of the most, the biggest regrets is that we just couldn't get a result for Frank. Frank was, again, an absolute diamond of a man, hell of a player. I think he would have turned out to be a brilliant manager. He wanted everything for the players. He wanted the best for the players, the best training facilities. The diet, the kit, everything he wanted the best. He wanted us to play good football. We just couldn't get a result from him. We just could not get a result from him. And really, sorry for him and for the club that it ended the way it did for him, because even in modern day ownership of football clubs, 50 odd days is no time at all for any manager to bed down what he wants to do, how he wants to play, the players he wants in his team, or anything like that. So had Frank Souza been given time, I'm sure he would have been an absolute, even more of a legend than he is at the football club. In
your opinion, Nick, do you think it was the right appointment at the time?
I don't know whether Frank wanted the job. I really don't. Was his hand forced into it? Did he feel as though he had to take it? I don't know. You'd have to ask him. But when he was appointed, I can tell you all the players bought into everything that Frank wanted to do. Every single. There wasn't one player. Yeah, people were disappointed that Alex McLeish decided to leave. Possibly understandable. I don't know, but every single player in that dressing room was very, very happy that Frank had been given the job. He asked Donald Park to come. Donald Park is one of the best coaches that I've ever worked with in the game. Goalkeeping coach Ian Westwater stayed the same. I was really happy with that. But we just couldn't get a positive result.
Is there anything that you can sort of put your finger on as to why? Because it was the same squad.
Yeah.
Arguably, that Alex had just left a few weeks prior.
Yeah. And
like you say, 50 days as as someone who is as much of a legend at the club as Frank Souza is, isn't enough time. Were the players ever able to really put their finger on how you just couldn't get a result for them?
Not really. It's you kind of look back and you think, could we have done? You always think, could we have done some more? Yeah, you can always do more. you can always do more. But it just wasn't to be. But we were all very, very shocked when Frank was relieved of his duties. Very, very shocked. But I suppose possibly the club thought if it carried on going that way, they didn't want to be sort of, back in the first division or whatever. So, but I don't think there was any danger of that happening.
Yeah, we've spoken to a couple of players, since the show's been going, who've been in and around the club in the last 15, 20 years.
Yeah.
And a lot seem to, go on the same track as yourself, that Frank was never given enough time, that given time, he would have got us out of the sort of rut that he was in.
No, of course he would.
And once
we had too good a squad. We had too good a squad not to get out of it.
There was, at the time, the financial constraints were getting to starting to get a little bit tighter.
Yeah.
There was a lot more reliance on younger players. We'd had Kenny Miller the season or two prior who'd left. Players like Gary O'Connor, Derek Riordan were breaking through. You had Scott Brown and Kevin Thompson coming in after them.
Yeah, the young pups, yeah.
The young pups, yes.
Whittaker, yeah.
Yeah, so when Frank leaves, Bobby Williamson comes in. How did you find Bobby as a manager to work with?
Different. Obviously played against Bobby's teams when he was Kilmarnock manager, and always thought they were very, very well organised. Always seemed to have a structure. I mean, they had some experienced players at Kilmarnock at the time, and it was always a very tough game. So really expected him to come in and sort of, lift the fortunes. I think that he had two really good men working with him in Jim Clark and Jerry McCabe. So came in, but for whatever reason, maybe the financial constraints as well limited to the Bobby and what he was allowed to do and what he was able to do. I know obviously Gary and Deke were really coming through. Kevin Thompson, who I lived down in Peebles with, and he used to come in with me into training, so I spent a lot of time with Kevin. Scott Brown was on the radar as well, and young Whitty, but with the sort of top end of the players, obviously Frank had left, Russell had gone, Ulrich had gone to Celtic, Stuart Lovell had left, who was a big part of what we were doing as well under Alex McLeish, to go to Livingston. So there was a lot of young boys coming in about the squad, and it was a real transition time.
So on that, when Bobby comes in, new managers come in with new ideas. You seem to be his first choice for a while, and then you went away on loan to Stockport County, and subsequently ended up leaving the club. What was it about? Did Bobby just not fancy you as a keeper? Did he just want to go in a different direction? What were the circumstances that led to your departure?
I've got to be totally honest here. So I think I had a year left on my contract at the end of the season. I think we might have played St Mirren at the end of the season last game, and I'd been told by the club that I could find a new club, that they wanted to go in a different direction. They wanted to look at other options. So during that summer, I was obviously speaking to a few clubs, and I thought, you know what? No, I don't want to leave. I want to stay. And when I said I wanted to stay, my family were settled. I loved the club. Never ever wanted to leave. And then basically got told that I wouldn't be picked if I stayed. So I just thought, well, if I'm not going to be picked, I need to play. I mean, it's quite fortunate that when I was playing at Hibs, I got into a few Ireland squads, and managed to make my debut. Mick McCarthy was the manager, so our paths crossed again, myself and Mick. So really wanted to stay involved with Ireland. So when I came back and Bobby said that I wasn't going to be involved, he was told that his hands were tied, and he was he couldn't pick me. That I decided, well, I need to go on loan. I need to play football. I've waited long enough to become a regular. The last thing I want now is for it to stop. So I went on loan to Stockport until the January, and then came back and probably had the hardest 4 or 5 months of my Hibs career, having to sit there, feeling as though I was possibly the best goalkeeper at the club, but not being picked to play in the team. When I questioned it with certain individuals, I got different stories from different people. So
Yeah, looking back, with Hibs in the goalkeeping position especially, I think it'd be fair to say that I think a lot of Hibs fans would be in agreement with me when we say that you're probably the last real safe pair of hands that we had. We've had keepers who can put in good performances, 25, 30 games out of 38, but you seem to be a real 38 out of 38 man. Every season that you played for us, I think that's vindicated in the realisation that you got picked to represent your country. Where do you think, over the years, Hibs have really sort of lacked getting someone in goals who was as competent and as consistent as you were?
Well, first and foremost, it's very kind of you to say that. It actually reminds me, I got invited to a game, I think about 4 years ago. I can't remember whether it was a derby or whether it was Celtic at home. I was lucky enough to be in the hospitality and was introduced to the people on my table, and one of them said, "Oh yeah, you're the last half-decent goalkeeper we had at Hibs." I'm thinking, I'm sure there's a compliment in there somewhere, pal. So, as I say, maybe I was fortunate. I played behind some great defences at Hibs. I played in some really good teams, and as I said previously in the interview, that a lot of times, a goalkeeper can look really good by playing behind a real good defence, and a goalkeeper can look poor from playing behind a poor defence. You end up as a goalkeeper, if you're playing behind players that are deficient in certain areas, you end up trying to change your game to compensate and try and help them out rather than just focusing on what you're good at and how you play your game. So, listen, Hibs have had good goalkeepers down the years. Before I was there and when I went to Hibs, everybody talks about, your Leightons, your Gorhams, your Burridges, your Ruffs, your people like that who were at Hibs. So you know that when you play in goal for Hibs, there's a standard. There's a standard you need to keep up. And I think Hibs have gone through a difficult time. They certainly did in the 3 or 4 years after I left. And then sort of since then, I think they've had competent goalkeepers. You don't get to play professional football, at the level that they're at without being a really good goalkeeper. So the odd error here and there certainly doesn't define you as a poor goalkeeper. I think the best goalkeepers are obviously the ones who make the least amount of mistakes and the ones who recover from mistakes the best.
Yeah, I think I definitely agree with that. I mean, just to sort of wrap up, Nick, when you look back at your time, with Hibs, you were there for 3 going on 4 years.
Yep.
What's your fondest memory of the club?
Fondest memories, the mates that I've made and I still have. Gary Smith, Stuart Lovell, people like that, people who I still keep in touch with. Roy Baines, who was the first goalkeeping coach who was there. Ian Westwater. Kevin Thompson as well, who I keep in touch with from time to time. The players that I played with, you look back at the team, the 6-2, the 3-0s, the derby games, AEK Athens, playing in the cup final, but the disappointment of losing the cup final. I look back on Hibs as, very, very close between that and Barnsley as to the happiest days of my career. The dressing room camaraderie from the yogis nailing people's shoes to the floor, to the Russell Latapy and his genius on the pitch. I was very fortunate to play for Hibs at a real good time. I was gutted when I was told to leave, when I was asked to leave. I didn't want to go. So I just look back on it with huge fondness. As I say, I've made loads of friends that I still keep in touch with. Just a great part of my career.
Well, I'd like to think that I'm speaking on behalf of most Hibs fans that we certainly do have fond memories of yourself as a keeper, Nick. And just once again, I'd just like to thank you for your time, taking the time out to speak to us this evening, and just wish you all the best for the future. Absolute pleasure. Thanks very much, Nick. Well, that was certainly interesting. What do you make of that, Mark?
Oh, brilliant. I've always got fond memories of Nick Colgan. I think from my perspective, he was always a safe pair of hands. So that was a great team under McLeish, and you've got remnants of that, I guess, under Lennon now. There's that same buzz about Easter Road at the minute as what there was back in 2000, 2001, which is exciting. Definitely right. We're going to throw to a couple of quick ad breaks and then come back to wrap up the rest of the show live on Radio Saltire.
We are Radio Saltire. Music for Scotland.
Welcome back to the last part of Monday Night Football live on Radio Saltair, where we're going to preview this weekend's games. We'll start with the home side this weekend, Hibernian hosting Ross County.
It's always Hibs first,
Standard.
There's a theme with you, Craig.
Well, it's just like when you're in this seat.
Oh, I find that highly unfair. Hibs are first every week, am I?
Well, I like to show favouritism to my team once in a while. So, Mark, we need to get back to winning ways. Home to Ross County, who had a tough result at Hamilton on Saturday. Arguably could have got something out of the game. Where do you, in terms of sort of personnel, where do you see Hibs? Do you see Hibs making any changes this weekend?
I think the most important thing is that we've got a week. Following the the defeat last Saturday to Aberdeen, it'll be a chance for the muscles to recover, for the players to recover any small knocks that they've maybe taken, whether it was against Celtic, Rangers, or even up in Aberdeen. It'll give the team time to digest where they went wrong, implement some learnings from the previous 3 games, and actually just give both their mental and their physical strains a chance to recover. So I don't see there being too many changes, to be honest. I think I'd like to see us starting with an attacking lineup. I was really positive with the first half against Rangers at home. I felt that having the attacking intent that we showed with the starting lineup with Shaw, Stokes, Murray and Boyle in the lineup. When Barker came on as a substitute, he caused a lot of problems, but I still feel that he's still not quite got the end product yet. So I think we'll win. I think it'll be a comfortable victory, and I think Hibs will really bounce back because they'll have a point to prove after losing so poorly against Aberdeen. And I think they'll want to build the confidence before going into the derby the following week.
Can I ask a question of you, Craig, in terms of previewing this game? How do Hibs solve the goal scoring problem? Is it going to be solved purely by one of those where the avalanche of goals eventually comes and suddenly you've got 3 red hot goal scorers in the team? Or does something need to change in terms of the system or in terms of mentality? Or how does Neil Lennon solve the problem that Hibs seem to be playing very well in a lot of games, at least according to him, but struggling to finish games off and kill games off?
I think when you look at the Rangers game, definitely there needs to be a sort of, it's not like the strikers aren't getting any chances. It's not like they're having to take pot shots for the edge of the box. Boyle and Barker against Rangers got into very good positions, and Barker had a couple of shots, but even when the shots are coming back out, where's the striker running, anticipating that hit off the post? All good strikers always anticipate, they don't stand still. You've got the instances with Boyle as well, flashing balls across the box. Murray was really unlucky not to connect with one. But then at the other times when the ball's coming, for a striker, a ball fizzing across the 6-yard box is the one that you want. Because all it takes is a glance. A little toe on it, nick off the head, boom, it's a goal. So I still think that we need an out-and-out goal scorer, someone in the mould of a Louis Moult. Obviously not him because he's going to Preston, but someone in that Adam Rooney kind of. I think I was watching on the TV on Saturday.
Can I just jump in here? Aberdeen have performed in everybody's eyes far more consistently than Hibs this season, but they've only scored 4 more goals than Hibs year to date. And so everybody keeps talking about Hibs not having a prolific out up top. I think we're still delivering.
No, but
scoring
that's my
more
point.
goals than Hearts.
Can I make the one point I would say on that though is the problem that Hibs, by their own admission, are Hibs keep volunteering, or Hibs fans or Hibs players or managers keep talking about how well they're playing in these games. If they're not winning them, then where is the problem? Because the problem I've heard from most individuals is we're playing really well, we just can't kill the game off. So that I think that Hibs are putting the focus on the goal scorers themselves. Neil Lennon has dropped Simon Murray for a prolonged period. There's been the ongoing wranglings with Anthony Stokes. Neil Lennon himself has put the focus on the problem being at the figurehead of the team, the number 9 in the team. If that isn't the problem, then why are Hibs struggling to kill off teams and win games that they should be winning, like the Rangers game, for example? I know what you're saying, Mark. They are scoring a number of goals, but I can't quite wrap my head around those two they seem like contrasting arguments to me then. If Hibs are playing good football, they just can't quite get the goals to win it. But the problem isn't scoring goals. I'm not quite sure what the problem is then.
My point is that Jason Cummins, for example, right? If Jason Cummins is still at Hibs and he plays against Rangers, that game finishes 3 or 4-0 to Hibs. Because in the box, Jason Cummins is taking those sort of chances. He's not resting on his laurels. You look at the goals that he scored against Hearts over the years. It's anticipating that ball across the 6-yard box and making a move across the defender and getting in front of him. I get your point, Mark, that Aberdeen have scored, 5 more goals than Hibs?
Yeah.
But that's where the frustration lies, is that they've scored 4 or 5 more goals, yet they're 9 points ahead. If we had that Rooney, that Stevie May, that no Ryan Christie because he's not a striker, but those 4 or 5 goals have turned into 9 points. So I know what you're saying, they're only 4 or 5 goals ahead, but they're also 9 points ahead.
Well,
So
it's also about when you score the goals,
Yeah.
and it's about not conceding at the other end.
Well, that's it. We've only had 5 clean sheets out of 19 league matches so far this season. So I think it's probably a combined effort of both defensive errors and. But I am defensive of our strike force. Yes, they do need to capitalise more, and I will agree that they do need to be putting the ball into the back of net, especially at crucial points in the game. Where we have been, dominating teams, and we've not been able to capitalise by, scoring that crucial second or third just to really kill the game off and, bury the opposition. But I still think there's been a lot of defensive errors this season as well that's cost us points.
I think that's a fair point from an outsider's perspective. Is that's why I asked the question, because I just felt like a huge amount of focus had gone on to Hibs strike force. But actually, Mark does make the point there that from a defensive standpoint, that's maybe creating more work for the strike force than should be asked of them, because Hibs are struggling to keep clean sheets. A lot of those draws, especially away from home. If you're playing a Dundee team that at that point is struggling, 1 goal should be enough. The problem is Whittaker's already made the mistake to give away the penalty, and you're then you're playing catch up to an extent.
Hamilton away, 1 shot, 1 goal.
Yeah, I think it is it does seem to be a bit of a problems in both penalty areas for Hibs, that there's costly mistakes at one end and there's costly misses at the other, and if it's such fine margins in football, and that is the problem I think that everyone's hinting at, is that the middle part of the game goes really well for Hibs. The middle part is in their favour, the midfield's flowing well a lot of time, especially when McGinn's on form and especially when McGeouch's on form. But if the strikers miss the chances and guys like Effie Ambrose have a day like they had on Saturday, you're not going to win games you should win.
The issue comes for the defence for me is that it's not been settled. Last year it was pretty much a case of Gray, McGregor, Hanlon, Stevenson. Mm-hmm. Everyone knew where they stood. The games where we switched it up, Fontaine came into the 3. Eventually Effie came in and McGregor was struggling a little bit, whereas this season we've had Whittaker at right back for a game, Gray at right back, Ambrose at right back, Porteous has came in, Fontaine's been out, McGregor's been out, Hanlon's been in, Hanlon's been out. So the defence has never really been given a chance to settle. But to sort of wrap up on the Hibs game, I don't think we've done predictions for a while.
I don't know.
Let's go back to doing predictions. Mark, your prediction for Saturday?
3-0 Hibs.
3-0 Hibs. Sam?
I think Hibs will win, but I think it will be a narrower margin. I think Hibs will win 2-1.
Fair enough. And then we'll go to McDermott Park for St Johnstone versus Hearts. We spoke a little bit about in the review of the Hearts game yesterday about that need to capitalise. How is it absolute must that Hearts need to come away with this with 3 points, or is it continuing, just keeping that momentum going?
Right, firstly, let me say, I know I'm going to take flack for the conversation we had earlier, because I know that it's going to be one swallow doesn't make a summer, and that Hearts are getting carried away, and at the end of it, it's only 3 points, and that's all true. That is true. I would argue with the one swallow makes a summer thing, because that suggests it's just been one positive result against Celtic. In actual fact, that there's been a consistency the last 3 performances, despite a continued inconsistency in team selections, that starts to suggest that structurally and functionally we're starting to get things right. That means even if we do rotate personnel a wee bit, there's a core there that can get us wins. So I think it's more than just one result. But I do agree, like I said earlier, no one should be getting totally carried away with yesterday's result for Hearts. But it is a support that has been desperately crying out for some positivity, some momentum, and a cause to rally behind. And I think that's why Saturday becomes vitally important, because ordinarily, especially for a Hearts team that have struggled against St Johnstone and at McDermott Park in particular, you'd probably go and you'd take a 0-0 at St Johnstone normally. It's quite a tricky place to go, particularly if you look in the context of Saturday. They've just gone to Ibrox, scored 3 goals, which I think is even more so than winning. For a Tommy Wright side to be scoring the kind of goals that they scored, that suggests that they're probably getting back to some sort of form, maybe, you know, potentially towards their best. That means it's going to be a huge challenge for Hearts. But I think the derby looms so large that it is very much a challenge to Hearts to go and match Hibs' result at the weekend. I think the feeling will be Hibs, albeit they're maybe struggling a little bit at the moment in comparison to how they have been the rest of the season, the feeling will be amongst the Hearts players that they'll probably go and win at Easter Road. And I think because of that, Hearts really have to harness it and go in and win, because then that does make the derby huge, and it gives Hearts what they've been crying out for all season, which is a sense of purpose. Because for too long this season, Hearts have felt like they're sort of just meandering along, and we're trying, you know, Craig Levein even said in the 8 away games at the start of the season, it was just about trying to hang on to the coattails of the top 6, so that when we were back at Tynecastle, we could push on again. First 2 or 3 games back at Tynecastle, they were then pretty disappointing draws, and it felt like this season could peter out here. It could peter out in early December to nothingness. The last week has changed that. We're all energised again. I'll be completely honest and say there were some Christmas-related excuses running around my mind when Saturday's game, when the idea of going to Saturday's game came up a week or 2 ago. You know, in terms of, well, it's 2 days before Christmas, I've got some shopping to do, you know, there's all commitments with the family, blah, blah, blah. It's probably not the right game to go at. I'll not be anywhere other than McDermott Park on Saturday night. And that's the positivity that comes from a result like that and from 9 points in a week. And that's what Hearts have been missing because of the lack of consistency this season. So I think that's why, those are all reasons why Saturday's game becomes so important, just to keep the fans on side with the players, to keep the fans on side with Craig Levein, which is a massive thing. That's been something we've been waiting for since he's been given the job, essentially, was for a few of the doubters to be given the opportunity to see this is why he's in the job, this is what he can bring. So I think a result at McDermott Park on Saturday then just serves to firm that up and to really give Hearts a momentum and a purpose going into a derby game that, as we'll cover loads at the weekend, and we'll talk about that in a moment, about what's happening with the show over the next few weeks, a derby game that is big for both sides now, because Hibs will be looking to shake themselves out of a wee period of sort of indifferent form.
There couldn't be a better game to do it in as well. Do you know what I mean? This is I know, like you say, we're going to talk about it a bit more, but This is, you know, just to touch on it while you were talking about it, this is the perfect game for both teams. This is Hearts' chance to make a statement and say, we've had a poor start to the season, we're back. This is Hibs' chance to say, no, do you know what, you're no back, stay where you are, we're going to keep on going. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out, especially over the weekend with the derby looming, so, you know, playing such a big part in both sets of supporters and teams' minds.
Well, both sides will potentially have an opportunity to different extents to say form is temporary and quality is permanent. So
Hibs' class is permanent, the same goes.
I avoided the word class for a particular reason. But it is that thing of Hearts players will be able to say, well, we've had an indifferent start to the season, but look at the circumstances we dealt with, and if they win that game, then it will be a case of we've been much maligned, but none of it's been justified, because actually we're a far better team than people made out. And Hibs, the other way around, will say, you know, we burst on the scene, things have caught up with us a wee bit, injuries, fatigue, it does grind you down playing in the SPL on a regular basis. So Hibs will be able to say at that stage, yes, we may go through dips in form, but there's a quality there that will maintain over the course of the season. That's why it's really exciting. That's why there is a small element in me that would like both teams to win at the weekend, so we're both flying, so we get both teams, not necessarily flying on Hibs' side, because I know things have tailed off a wee bit, but so that both teams have got their tails up at least going into the game, and we get a proper game. My one concern is that either manager, if they pick up a bad result at the weekend, that either manager goes in thinking actually a draw will do us in the derby.
Aye.
And then it may affect the game as a spectacle. I would like to see both teams, that classic 6-pointer, looking to gain on the other in the league or pull away from the other in the league, but also have the thing of we can really knock their confidence and cause a bit of a crisis on the other side if they lose the game. That would be great. So I think the weekend purely plays a part in the narrative of the derby, which is really, really important and will be really exciting to watch. In terms of personnel and things, I think Craig Levine's actually got quite a job for the weekend, because it's so difficult to argue to change that team, but there are logical changes. Like John Souttar should play at centre half, but how do you drop Michael Smith after that game? So actually I think everyone's behind Levine right now, but there are question marks that will be asked about Saturday's team, because how do you change that team?
Yeah.
The team that's come up with one of the most complete performances of any Hearts team in a very, very long time. And as we say, yes, it only earned 3 points, but it did also rally the support. So I think in that sense, Craig Levine's actually put himself in quite an unenviable position for Saturday. I think we'll see a very, very similar team. I don't know if it'll be identical. I think there has to be a wee bit of horses for courses with St Johnstone, because they will attack Hearts in a very, very different way than Celtic did. But it'll be very interesting. And if we're going to predictions, I think Hearts will still continue to be solid at the back. Now Randall's found that place at right back. There's still a bit of a question at left back, but Brandon showed an ability to defend there. Michael Smith could move back there if Souttar does come in. I think Hearts will still keep the defensive record up. I can't see them conceding more than one. If I was being really conservative, I would go with the old a draw away from home is alright and a 1-0, but I'm going to stay confident and I'm going to go 1-0 Hearts at McDermott Park.
Mark?
Jury's out on this one. That's confidence that Hearts have obtained their 9th clean sheet this season. In Sam's opinion there, I think the bubble will burst, and I'll go for 1-1.
I don't know if that would constitute a bubble burst, to be completely honest. But
let's be fair. I mean, Hearts have had 3 clean sheets in a row. They've had 3 clean sheets in a row, and I think everybody they'll be on the come down after the high of beating Celtic 4-0.
All that is it's the pin getting pulled out. The 1-0 draw is the pin getting pulled out, and the bubble burstings when the high bees roll at the time.
Hibs take an extra 2 points, going to a derby. It's got to be 2-0. That's it.
Can't see it. Like I say, I think Hearts they have been rallied by this, but not in a manner that I think there's any scope to take the foot off the gas, because to be completely honest, the season's not been good enough to take the foot off the gas after one result. There's a lot of making up to do for Hearts.
Yeah. I think one of the things about this season that makes it more exciting as well is that every team is capable of beating everybody on their day.
Yeah.
You look at Aberdeen, Rangers.
Well, apart from Celtic, only we can beat Celtic.
There's only one team that Celtic haven't beaten in the league in their unbeaten run.
Aye.
Who do you think it is?
How many points have you got against them for the 2 points?
Excellent.
Yeah, okay, right. So I think we'll wrap up at this point, Craig. I'll just take over for a moment, because I know there's been some questions about what's happening with the show over the festive period, particularly given the fact that Monday is Christmas Day next week. So first and foremost, apologies for the lateness on last week's show on the podcast. The Neil Poynton interview is a very good one and is definitely worth your time. It will go up alongside this show, so if you're listening to this show double back for last week's, you'll hear everyone probably write us off against Celtic, but you'll also hear a very, very interesting interview with former Hearts and Oldham left back Neil Poynton. In terms of next week's show, we're going to pre-record on Sunday. We know it's Christmas Day, so it'll go out live on Radio Saltaire. Hopefully you can tune in if things are starting to wind down on your Christmas Day. We know that may not be possible, but it'll be up on the podcast and things as well. Obviously, we did think about maybe no doing a Christmas Day show, but the fact is there's a derby 2 days later, so it's kind of important. So we'll be in here early on Sunday morning to pre-record that, and it'll go live on Christmas Day. We will also have a special Christmas present for you. Now, last year, or a few years ago now, we dropped a very special Christmas present that we didn't really tell anyone about, and it sort of went mad. It went really viral and in the papers and things like that. That was the Michael Stewart interview, Craig. That was, the sweariest of all our interviews. Yeah, so this one may not be quite as controversial or sweary, but we believe for a Hibs contingent at least will be very, very interesting and give an insight to a really interesting period in the club's history through the eyes of someone who was really, really heavily involved and deep-rooted in the club. Now, I don't know if we want to give the name away at this stage, Craig.
No, not yet. I don't think we'll give the name away.
Just as well, because you mouthed the name to me there, and I'm thinking, I'm sure we're not giving this away. Right, okay, so we're not going to, but keep an eye out on Christmas Day. Obviously, it's on the podcast, so if you don't get around to it to Boxing Day or 3 weeks after Christmas Day, it's fine, but it will be there for you, and it will be very, very worth listening. It was Craig's first proper interview on his own with a former Hibs player, Hibs legend. So, so
I had to go between being host and fanboy a wee bit. It was that weird.
So I've not heard it yet, but he assures me did manage to hold it together long enough. But you'll all find out on Christmas Day. It'll be worth it to that just to hear the moment where Craig absolutely geeks out. I'm sure there'll be at least one in there.
I think there's one or two.
And we're going to keep the content coming over the festive period as well. So as I say, there'll be a couple of potential pre-records, but very quickly in the new year we'll get back to the phone interviews like we had with Nick today, like we had with Neil Poynton last week. We'll try as much as possible to alternate the content between the two clubs as we have been lately, and we very much hope to keep that going and that you will stay with us into the new year on Monday Night Football. Craig, I think that's all of the business. Are you okay with that?
I'm absolutely fine with that.
Okay, right, I think we'll wrap up there then.
Well, just like Sam says, if you do want to get in touch with us, head over to our Facebook page, facebook.com/Monday Night Football, and also get us on Twitter, which is I think that's what we like to interact on the most, at MN Football. Do you want to do the honours, Sam, or will I do it?
You do it.
Oh, MN Football, that's FITBA. But yeah, thanks very much again to Nick Colgan for giving up his evening to talk to us tonight. Thanks again to Mark and Sam for joining me in the studio, and we'll be back with a pre-recorded episode on Christmas Day to preview the derby on Wednesday the 27th. Thank you very much for listening to us on Monday Night Football on Radio Saltire.